Excellent. My name is Martin Kirsch. I'm the Executive Director of the Food Service Packaging Association. And I'll just decline that. Executive Director of the Food Service Packaging Association. Did anybody this morning have the pleasure of seeing Mark Pawsey speaking? Mark Pawsey MP, any hands up? Well, I'm only going to make a quick announcement now. We are very pleased, indeed proud to say that Mark has become our new chairman. So we now have a chairman who is also chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Packaging, which is terrific. Mark used to work in the industry, so he's come home. Anybody here come to the debate last time? Do we have any debate groupies? We do have a couple of debate groupies. That's excellent. As you know, these debates are done entirely fairly, and we have no, I tell you what I want you to do. You haven't come from your homes, you've come from Mars, right? And you've descended on this planet, and there's all this chatter about plastic, and you don't even know what a plastic is. Okay? I'm saying that because I just want you to get rid of all the thoughts that you have about the subject, everything else. I want you to come and be neutral, because we want this to be a debate in the classic sense. We want these people, we want you to listen to the debate, ask questions, and I'll give you the rules in a moment. And then we want you to think, who has persuaded me the most? Who amongst these very fine people, brilliant speakers, who of them has been able to convince me this is the right way to do? So forget about anything else. Let's do this to enjoy. Let's do it to have a bit of fun. And of course, this is the highlight of the show as well. Now, we have got, I'm going to do some introductions. I tell you what, we'll have the against team coming on first. I know everybody, because I do. Bring them on. We need 4 seats together. 1, 2, 3, you need your owed a seat. Have one on me. Right, I thought we had 4. What happened to your 4th? He's all right, I'll put out, the 4th is an invisible person who will be sitting here. Right, we are going to give you, in order, well, I've got here anyway. I don't know who is going to lead or anything. We have got Robert Fell. Robert is the Director and Chief Executive of the Metal Packaging Manufacturers Association. He was formerly involved with the British Metals Recycling Association, has worked at the Ardagh Group, and for 1,000,000 years at Crown. We have Professor Tony Ryan, OBE, and I reckon you're the only OBE we've had. Speaking at the whole show this year, you've got that one to yourself. He is the Professor of Physical Chemistry at the University of Sheffield. He's a polymer chemist, and we were asking for a polymer chemist yesterday. You would have had a field day. And sustainability leader, and was Pro-Vice Chancellor of the university's Faculty of Science. He's currently Director of the Grantham Centre for Sustainability Futures, and has delivered a TED Talk, so he ought to be bloody good. Right, the next we have is Rebecca Burgess, Chief Executive of City to Sea. And she is described, now first of all, City to Sea, who's heard of City to Sea here? You should take a look at the website. I did, because of this, very good. Now, they campaign to reduce plastic pollution by preventing it at source. They have grown, they've got now 18 in there. Rebecca is formerly from Eunomia, and I think most of you will have heard at some stage, they are an environment consultancy in Bristol, and I'm sure you've heard people from Eunomia speaking in the past, and was involved in the European community on their plastic strategy. And it has to be said, City to Sea, you're described as a C, S-E-A, E-O, which I thought was quite clever. And then coming in from the rear, and very late addition, with no briefing, just shows he can do it, is Simon Balderson from the Saran Group. If you don't know it, they've got a stand over there. They are very much involved with innovative food packaging solutions, bags, pouches, cooking bags, etc. I'm on commission. Right, okay, we'll put you down there. Right, so now we're going to bring on the 4 team, if you would take your places. Right, okay. We are going to give you Margaret Bates, who is sitting here. And Margaret is Executive Director of the On-Pack Recycling label. Some of you will have heard Margaret when she was at University of Northampton, formerly president, and I always get this wrong, the Chartered Institute of Wastes Institution, for God's sake, I always get it wrong, I told you I would, of Waste Management. She has traveled the world looking at waste management. She's seen a lot of the stuff you see in the press. She's seen that very much at first hand. We have got Richard Kirkman. He is Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Veolia, UK and Ireland. He's a board member at Veolia, and he is responsible for the technical direction of Veolia, with particularly technology and innovation, to resource the world with materials, water and energy. And he only has a budget of £1 billion, so let's feel sorry for Richard. Right, okay. We have got Barry Turner. Barry is Director of Plastics and Flexible Packaging. He always wanted to do that from a little boy, and he's got the dream job. The BPF does represent, it's not just packaging, it should be said. They represent packaging in, plastics rather, in all walks of life, from automotive, constructive, the lot. But Barry's division is basically where we are today, I would say. And then finally, from the WWF, and as Paula always would say herself, hate to disappoint you, it has got nothing to do with wrestling. She is the Worldwide Fund for Nature, etc. And she is the Sustainable Materials Specialist. And she has spent time at Pret-a-Manger and M&S. So she has experienced a whole breadth on both sides, which is excellent. And what am I going to say about you? What else do you want me to say about you? I'm going to say you bring a unique perspective. How about that? Now, the way this is all going to work, as I said before, declutter the old brain. For and against, we have a motion. This House believes that we will fail to meet net zero carbon targets if we ban plastic packaging. I was going to give a reason why we came to that, but in trying to do that, I'm obviously going to bias you in one way or the other, so I can't really. I think we've got to let the debate run its course. What will happen is that each speaker will speak for 5 minutes, but it will do it on the basis we'll have a proposer, we will have someone from the against team, they will speak for 5 minutes each, and a question will be asked, either by me or, better, yourselves. And then we'll have the seconder, same thing. We'll then we'll go through the third and the fourth. We'll have questions. And then finally, they will have an opportunity to give a summing up for 3 minutes, for and then against. So it'll always go in that order. So, odd and even, you'll work it out, just in case you get lost in this whole thread. Now, I don't know who is batting first, and I don't on either side, but and who are the tail ender, but we'll find out in a minute. When it comes to the questions, I'm going to disappoint you all. You have a maximum of 1 minute to ask your question. 1 minute. So this isn't speech making. It genuinely has to be a question. These people have to decide very quickly who's going to get it, and the clock will start as soon as you finish the question, so they've got to move. 2 minutes you get, right? 2 minutes to answer it. So we're going to have, aren't we? You're going to ask lots of questions, aren't you? Please say yes. Right. So who is opening the batting for 4? Margaret, take it away.
So actually, I would like to start by saying I think we can hit the net zero targets without plastic. But the question is, do we want to? So 40% of our food is currently imported. If we carry on importing food without plastic, then we will increase our carbon emissions, but we'll be offshoring them, so that won't matter so much, will it? Or we could stop having such varied and healthy diets. We could move down from, a recommended 5 a day to maybe 1 or 2 a week, if you'd prefer, in the winter. But I don't think we're going to do that either. And then actually, when you do get ill and you go to your local doctor or your local hospital, then they won't have the medicines you need because those medicines won't last so long and they'll have taken a lot longer to do. So actually we'll then have less people in the country because we'll be live less long and die, and actually less people in carbon terms is really beneficial. However, I think thanks Tony. However, I think maybe we need to be a bit more politically astute. That's the difference between working for a university and working for OPRL, maybe. And we need to differentiate between plastic and plastic pollution. So pollution, whether it's plastic or not, is a problem. Plastic can be part of the solution. So when we're looking at this, we need to be very careful at what we want to achieve. So more than half of all goods in Europe are packaged in plastic. And of the 57 million tons of plastic produced in Europe annually, 39% is packaging. And if we look at the impacts of this, the raw materials are responsible for about 45% of the greenhouse gas emissions, manufacturing 38%, secondary packaging 5%, 3% in transport, and 9% at end of life. But we're very much focusing on the end of life when we're looking at packaging. Plastic packaging in particular has become ubiquitous because it's great for packaging. It's lightweight, it's robust, it's tough, it's puncture resistant. It makes our food last longer, it makes it easier for us to move it, it means it costs less. Can you imagine what would happen if we took plastic out of cars, for example? How much that would impact? Without plastic, packaging weight could increase by as much as 400%, and production and energy costs could double, and we could get greater material wastage. Because if we transport in plastic, we tend to have it less intensive, use less fuel, and get less damage. You're less likely to have things like shattering. And compared to other materials, it can have a lower carbon footprint. But I'm not saying plastic is always better than fiber, is always better than glass or metal. What I'm saying is, where plastic is the right thing, plastic is great. Where metal is the right thing, metal is great. And the same for the other materials. There is nothing wrong with plastic. We're demonizing plastic. Plastic's never done anything wrong. What we've done is we've mismanaged our plastic, and that's where the problem is. In terms of food waste, plastic is vital. If food waste was a country, it would be the third biggest emitter in the world. So the carbon footprint of food produced and not eaten is estimated at 3.3 billion tons. For every ton of packaging, bloody hell. Sorry. Didn't say that out loud.
I'll give you 10 seconds for that.
Thanks. So if we're going to look sensibly at what our carbon emissions are, we need to look at the role packaging has in reducing food waste. We need to look very carefully at the end of life. At the moment, we're focusing our decisions based on littering. I think it is an appalling indictment of our society that we are using littering to determine what we're doing instead of thinking, hold on, how do we stop littering? Hate to agree with the minister. Oh, no, I love to agree with the minister now because I don't work for a university. And we need to be very careful. So the problem isn't with plastic. The problem is our systems leak. And whatever our materials are, we need to stop our systems leaking. So we don't want metal leaking into the environment, paper, plastic, card, or anything else. We want to close those loops, and we need to do that whatever the material is.
Stop. How about that? Well done. Right. Now, who's opening the baton? Right, here we go. The CEO is with us.
Before I start, who has had to buy a coffee, a hot drink, something to eat over the last 2 days of this conference?
No.
Yeah? I'm not surprised it's all of you. And all of you have had to use single use. You're even sitting on single use chairs. So that is the problem. City to Sea, as most of you don't know, are a not-for-profit organisation campaigning to stop plastic pollution, and it's that plastic pollution that's key. We concentrate on those single-use items most commonly found on our beaches, in our rivers, and in our oceans. And I want to say we're not against plastic, but we are very much against plastic pollution. And I know that this debate is going to be making lots of great arguments about how when the LCA comes out that plastics is the best. But before we get onto that, it's good to remember the issues that we're facing around plastic pollution and the problems that it's giving to the environment. And also making sure that recyclable doesn't necessarily mean recycled right now. So as this picture demonstrates, it's a ton of PET bottles. The most commonly found item is a PET bottle, whether that's in the UK, in Europe, or further overseas. So recycling isn't the answer right now. We can't recycle our way out of the problem. It's affecting our wildlife and our sea life, and I know you all know this, but it's also affecting us. We don't know what damage plastics and plastic pollution is doing to our own health. So at City to Sea, we very much believe that it's important to rethink the use of packaging. We want to make sure that people are refusing it or removing it in its entirety before it's even questioned, whether it's plastics or any other material. We want to see reduction. So consumption is a massive issue here. And if we can just reduce what we're buying, then that's going to make a massive difference. And then the reuse and refill models. And so let's look at the bottled water industry as an example of this. So drinking bottled water is 900 times more carbon intensive than tap water. It also takes 8 litres of water to make one single bottle of plastic water bottle. So given that Britain has some of the best tap water in the world, it's a heavily regulated environment that has millions of tests carrying out every single year, and that 2 litres of tap water costs about 1/3 of a penny, everyone should refill. And that's where City to Sea comes in. So a little bit about Refill is it's a drinking water campaign that we've set up to connect you with taps all over the UK and now globally, with over 30,000 businesses offering free tap water. We have an app so you can easily see them, and we're engaging communities around the world. And we've been lucky enough to win the Marketing Campaign of the Year for our National Refill Day campaign. And we know that it's making a difference. We know consumers want to see this. So it's changing behaviour. We're estimated that we've saved over 100 million plastic water bottles from entering our waste streams. And 62% of people are more likely to carry a reusable if they've heard of Refill. So we're not the only ones innovating in this space. There's lots of great innovation. But yes, if we can ban more single-use, pointless plastic, then we would get closer to the carbon targets. And why couldn't we have banned at the NEC all of the single-use items that we're using? Because I haven't seen daylight for about 48 hours, and I'm sure all of you have been here.
1 minute to go. Do you want it?
No?
Do you want your 1 minute? You can keep going.
No, it's time to turn the tide.
Oh, right. Well done. Well done. God. I'm afraid there isn't a bonus point if you actually end earlier, but I'm sorry about that. But nonetheless, okay, I said someone had the opportunity to ask a question. Does anybody want to ask a question at this stage? Do I see a hand? I do. Could we give a microphone to the lady in the front row? Could we give a this lady here, sorry, you wouldn't have seen. Right, lovely. I'm not going to time you. You're going to be quick. Quick.
It's for Rebecca. How many...
No, it's got to be to both of them. They've
Oh,
both
has
got
it?
to-
Okay.
Yeah, it's not one of those,
In
you
terms
know.
of reusable packaging,
Who's answering
is
this?
it not true that a lot of reusable packaging uses a lot more energy than single-use plastic bottles, for instance? You know, how many plastic bottles is the equivalent of one reusable bottle?
Who wants to answer that? It doesn't have to be you. Any one of you can to make it.
Is this working? Yeah. Reusable packaging definitely is more carbon intensive than a single-use a plastic item. The idea around reusables is that it's used many, many, many times into infinity, and that it's a behavior change around developing the systems of refill that really help engage and enable people to do it. So I'm not saying that reusables is the one that will come up higher on a life cycle analysis, but if you look at the environmental damage that those single-use plastics make in our environment, then reusables typically don't get littered.
Okay, and Margaret, if you would...
However, it's not that straightforward. So if you look at the case of plastic bags, for example, recent survey found that people used, on average, 54 bags for life a year. So we need to make sure that if people are buying reusables, they're using them as reusables. And everyone here is probably, if they say singing to the choir, but there's a heck of a lot of people out there who really don't care. So we need to make sure that we look at supply chain management, because even with single-use items, you can, as a manufacturer or producer, put all the right labels on it. Obviously, there is only one right label in case anyone's in any doubt, and it's the OPRL label. But you can put the right labels on it. You can design all your systems in it. But if someone throws it into the wrong bin or litters it, all of that's irrelevant. And we need to move away from producer responsibility and start talking about supply chain responsibility and give everyone a role.
There we are. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Can I just counter that?
Well, no. Well, hold on. Let's hold on, because if we do that, we never even get to our second speaker. So who is going to be your... Who have we got? Cook follows Strauss. Right, okay, here we go. Well done.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Richard Kirkman. So I would say don't always believe the rhetoric. I hear this quite often. We can't recycle our way out of this. Where does the evidence come for that wonderful statement that actually has no basis in science whatsoever? We can recycle our way out of this. We need to refill, reuse, and get energy back as well out of materials, but we certainly can recycle our way out of these problems. Now, on my journey around the place, I hear various opinions of people. I do hear that we never landed on the moon. I hear that the Earth is flat. I hear that vaccines don't work, and I also hear that we should get rid of plastics. And all those things are myths that we really need to debunk. Now, the plastic bag issue is a really great example. We take all the plastic bags, we recycle them, they come back through doorstep collections and collections at stores. So we absolutely know what the result of the 5p tax was. Now, if I went back in time and said to you, I've just invented an amazing new material, it lasts 1,000 years, you can use it as many times as you want, and we can keep on recycling it, and it uses a fraction of the normal material and energy that all the other options make. You'd think I was a genius. But someone did do that. They invented the plastic bag. And I don't think there's any real evidence that other options are better. When the 5p tax was introduced, all the bag weights went up between 5 and 10 times the thickness. And now we receive just a little bit more plastic back than we did in the first place. Thicker bags, less of them. Number of bags has gone down by 75%. The weight of all the bags that are coming back is about 1.2 times as much. So the outcome was we've used more plastic to do the same job. Was that a clever thing to do? Do I think we're going to go back to thin bags? No, probably not. But it doesn't mean it's not the right solution. We just find it difficult sometimes as engineers and scientists to communicate to the wider population, and fashion takes over. And it's a very fashionable position to be anti-plastics. But I do believe that's all it is. What have I seen as well at our sorting centres recently? Well, I always go down there every week to see the types of materials that are coming in through the doorstep collection. And now I'm starting to see lots of reusable metal containers, water bottle containers coming through the front door because people like going out and buying a new one, or they get gifted another one. You know, how long does everybody reuse their metal water bottle for? Because it needs to be used for a very long time. I would probably question infinity as the amount of time that we could use the bottles for, because not many people are probably doing that. So we have to be very mindful of the refill solution. I do think it works for water. I don't think it works for everything that we go out and buy. You know, if you go out and buy some ketchup, are you going to have a reusable container from that? Is everybody going to continue to reuse it forever? No, they're going to start throwing those things away, and we will have invested huge amounts of carbon in it. Another way of looking at this is if you wind back the clock before plastics and say, okay, let's use a different material for the last 30 years. If you'd used metal or glass or some other common material used for packaging, if you calculate the carbon emissions there would have been, it amounts to the amount of carbon to raise global temperatures by 3 or 4 degrees. So we wouldn't even be having this debate. We'd be in the middle of a complete climatic collapse at this point if we hadn't used this marvellous invention. Now, please don't take me wrong. I don't want to be lynched. I don't think any of this material should be going in the ocean. I don't think hardly any of the UK material does. It's mostly overseas, and that absolutely needs to stop. And I support our opposition 100% on that mission to make that go away, and I think we're very well aligned on that point. But this does not mean we should get rid of plastics. And the answer, in the last minute I have, to all of this is the government's resources and waste strategy, which you may have heard the Minister talking about earlier, but shifting the cost of packaging from local authorities to the producers will enable better eco-design, better judgments to be made. I think it's a difficult change for people to accept because any change in industry, there is a cost. But I do think it will put the responsibility in the right place and lead to better eco-design. Deposit return schemes are known to work. Currently, we have 60% of bottles returned in this country. If you go to where there's deposit return schemes, it's 95, 98%. So that works. We'll get all the bottles back. And I suppose I would leave you, and we need labelling. Sorry, I can't forget to mention labelling, or Margaret will crucify me, but you know, if we don't have binary labelling, and I don't know who it should be that's doing the labelling, but probably OPRL sounds like a really good idea. Then people will know when they put something in a bin which bin to put it into.
Right. Thank you, Robert. That is up, and I'm so sorry the wicked finger of time, or whatever they say, is caught up with us. You need a microphone. And who is the lucky recipient? You know, you need a good, strong team captain there. Yeah. Right, okay. You ready to rock and roll? Right, okay. Go for it, yeah, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I should start by saying that in reality, I have no problem with plastic packaging per se. And I believe that we need to be very careful about the current level of general vilification of packaging, given how critically important it is to society, whether society realises or not. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the current world problems being caused by packaging. So not only do we have to respond appropriately, we need to be seen to be responding responsibly. We need to ensure that we can justify robustly anything we put onto the market, and we must not, under any circumstances, be seen to be defending the indefensible. However, with regard to net zero carbon targets, I believe that we have to think far more broadly than the title of this debate suggests. Yes, we must consider sustainability properties of the packaging itself. Is it recyclable by design? Will it be recycled in practice? And very importantly, if it is recycled, what can it be recycled into and how many times? Metal, for example, is a permanent material and as such can be recycled again and again with no loss of quality, a characteristic which of course makes it perfect for the circular economy. And as we know, that something like 80% of all the metal that has ever been produced is still in use today, a fairly impressive statistic. That said, if we really want to reduce the effects of carbon and global warming, then we have to consider the positives that good packaging provides. So, we know, for instance, from the United Nations that roughly 1/3 of the food produced in the world for human consumption every year gets lost or wasted. And we also know that when food decays, it gives off methane, which has a global warming potential of something like 20 times that of CO2. On top of that, we have a growing world population, currently around 7.7 billion, and looking to rise to 9.8 billion by 2050. If we continue to waste food the way we currently are, how on earth are we going to feed everybody without having to destroy even more natural habitat? The answer, of course, is by investing in packaging, not eliminating it. Although I should qualify that as saying investing in the right type of packaging. Our greatest asset here is shelf life. Well, it's pretty obvious really, isn't it? It's not rocket science. The longer the shelf life, the far less likely it is for the food to be wasted. And as we've seen, food waste is a serious world problem. So one of our members, Crown Holdings, went as far as to commission a study on this very topic from Delaware University in the States, entitled Effects of Metal Packaging on Energy and Food Waste. And I'd like to share the top line results with you. A key finding from research was that for the United States and Canada, over 342 million litres of food waste is avoided every year by their current level of usage of metal cans. Now, if that figure is extrapolated to the number of metal food cans used around the world, we get to a staggering 1 billion metric litres of food waste avoided as a consequence of being packed in metal cans. And it's important to note that this figure is only for the consumer level, only in the home. We can only begin to imagine how big that figure would be if we had the data for the whole supply chain. It's therefore well worth imagining just how much additional savings could be made if more fresh produce was canned. And here the study helps us as well. The study highlighted that in the USA, if their entire fruit and vegetable supply were canned, it would save an estimated 7 million metric tons of additional food waste, equivalent to 22 million tons of CO2 avoided. Now, if you're serious about reducing CO2, I would politely suggest this looks like a pretty good place to start. And if we're looking to reduce CO2 still further, well, metal packaging helps us here as well. It doesn't need refrigeration, not at any time in its supply chain. And just to finish off, use of refrigeration actually gives us another problem. Imagine, if you will, you want soup for your lunch. You've got choices. You can take a tin out of the cupboard and heat it up from 18 to 20 degrees, or you can take another type of container that has to be refrigerated out of the fridge. That'll have to be heated from 4 degrees. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, but that gives you an additional requirement of 15% more energy to heat your soup to serving temperature on top of all the refrigerated storage.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. That's perfect. Thank you very much. I've got to be strict. I'm so sorry.
Only had my conclusion.
It's only in the spirit of fairness. I've cut you off in your prime, I tell you that. Do we have a question? A nice short question from a member of the audience. We do. We have a gentleman over here. And he's going to ask a killer question.
Hello. Hello. Yeah. My name's Chris Radway from Circulonomy Limited. Surely if you go on extending the shelf life of foods in your fridge, people's fridges are going to get so full they'll lose track of the food they've got. So there must be a question of diminishing returns here. We don't need to go on ad infinitum increasing the longevity of food in our fridges. Thanks.
Did you all get that? Do we? Right. I don't know, which way do we can do it either way. Who can we what about someone from this side? Since
I'm happy to answer that.
You're happy to answer it then?
I totally agree. The whole point about canned food is you don't have to keep it in the fridge. Therefore, it's not expending all the energy. Of course, also, you don't have to have refrigerated storage, refrigerated trucks, all of which take a huge amount of energy. And of course, the big thing is shelf life. We cannot go on wasting the amount of food we're wasting. The natural habitat is at risk because otherwise we're going to need more agricultural land, and that's just not an option.
So there you go. Robert managed to complete his presentation. Very nifty. Barry, I think you've got the mic. I can see you're going to answer it. Don't worry. You just shout up.
I'd like to ask, how many of you like fresh food?
Hands up. There we go.
Quite a lot of you. What's the best way of getting fresh food into your house, and where do you normally store it? Sorry?
Oh, I thought you said out of a can. I was going to say out of a can of lettuce.
Sure you're allowed to participate.
I thought a garden.
I think we need to recognise that different forms of packaging exist for different reasons. And certainly one of the big bonuses that plastics has been able to bring to us is the ability to bring fresh food into our homes and allow us to consume it when we want to, because we all live busy lives. We can't plan out what we're going to consume every single minute, every single day, and that's one of the benefits plastics brings. Thank you.
Thank you, and answered very well and very to the time. When I say well, I mean to the time. Now, we have got another. Who's your third? Is it you? Oh gosh, you may as well could have carried on. I shall time you starting now.
Okay. Put the brochure down.
Well, that's good and bros. That's 5 seconds, Barry.
Right. I think you've heard all the arguments already about why we use plastics. I mean, it's lightweight, it's durable, doesn't shatter, less emissions. It's sort of easier to transport, consumes far less energy. I could keep on going on. And I totally take the point that's been echoed earlier. That we have to really stop the leakage from any material into the environment. And we all know where that leakage comes from, and we all know what needs to be done. Many of these countries where there is horrendous leakage of all materials and all substances into our oceans, developing worlds who haven't got an EPR system. And we were talking about EPR as being one of the things that we are very good at and are going to get better at in this country and are very good at in Europe. If only we had it elsewhere, we wouldn't have that sort of leakage. And hopefully it will come. In the UK, can we do things better in terms of reducing carbon even further? And what can our industry do? We're doing lots of things. You can decarbonise the feedstock, for example. We're going to decarbonise the transport system. We all know that's coming. But there's lots and lots of more things that we can do to even further improve that footprint of plastics so it will keep on delivering that resource efficiency benefit. So the secret is circular economy, because if I was to ask you all, how many of you would have liked to have recycled the containers that you used today? How many would you have liked to do that? I think the majority of us would have wanted. Were we given the opportunity? Not really. That's what needs to change.
Very good. That's short. My goodness me. Well, that allows us sort of, my goodness, 3 minutes short. That's excellent. Thank you. It's all about timekeeping, isn't it? I would like to bring on, sorry, I was getting completely carried away on the shortness of that. You took me by surprise. We require a third, and we have it here, right. Simon.
Okay. I think I might be on the wrong side here in a way, but I don't know what you think, but everything I've heard so far, I've agreed with on both sides. Listen to Margaret and Richard and Barry there. Everything they said is absolutely right. Same here. And I think that's probably the point, really, in the sense that this isn't a really, or shouldn't be, a debate about plastics or not plastics. We shouldn't really be polarising the argument, I don't think. The argument is broader than a single material here. The argument really is all about carbon footprints and packaging and shelf life and so on. And there's a number of solutions, and we've heard a dozen of them so far already, and they're all viable solutions. The industry itself, I think Margaret made the point actually, uses the right material for the right job. And in many cases at the moment that's plastic, and it really does a good job. And so, you know, in that respect, I would sit on that side. I'd certainly agree. But the plastics thing, I fear that the argument about plastics has become emotional rather than practical. I have kids, and they have mates and stuff like this. You talk to them, it's not about carbon footprint anymore. It's about dead whales and microplastics in limpets and turtles with a plastic bag over their head. It's an emotional argument now. They're not really anti-plastic because of the carbon footprint of plastic. They're anti-plastic because of ocean pollution and life and stuff like this. Now, we have the closed loop recycling. We've been talking about it here. You go to India, look at the Ganges in Bangladesh, look at the Indus, look at the Mekong in Vietnam. It's an absolute mess. And that's the reality of the situation, and that's really what the kids of today are worried about, not carbon footprint. So I fear the argument has been lost for plastic, and I think that could be a shame, because I think the answer is for the industry, packaging, plastic, not plastic, whatever, to be working all together to find the best solutions at the best time. Now, time is the important thing here. Plastics have been around for decades, and they're fantastic. They've been developed over this time, and they do a fantastic job. The plastic replacement technology, some of the stuff that we work on, we've been working on it for 3 years. In those 3 years, it's incredible how it's come on. You give another 10 years or 20 years, we won't be having this discussion anymore, because things will change. You know, we're talking now about plastics or not plastics from the base of what we know now, and the technology we have now. This technology is changing very quickly, and some of these new materials coming through, cellulosic materials, natural plastics, and so on, are extraordinary materials, and we can use those to make packaging, and we can leave the fossil fuels in the ground. Now, the thing about these cellulosic materials, if you make paper, for example, you have to plant a lot of trees. If you make these biocoatings, you've got to plant a lot of plants. They are a massive carbon sink. If you imagine all the packaging came from plants and trees, that in itself is a massive carbon sink. And that holds the carbon for a period of time. Okay, it'll release it back again afterwards. But I think the point being here is that we're talking from now and where we are now, and now plastics do the best job, they really do, or metal or whatever else it might be. You wait for 20 years' time, things will change, and we need to basically work together with the plastics industry and the metal industry and everybody else to solve all these problems and bring in these new technologies, not, unfortunately, to sit with the fors there and the against here, because we're all on the same side here, and the solutions won't come from polarising the argument, and in fact, the environment will suffer if we have a plastics versus anti-plastics debate. So sorry to pull down the main motion, but that's my thought. Thank you.
It's your time. Thank you very much. Now we are allowed, and thank you. Gets an applause. Give them if you want to give anyone applause, give them an applause. Good stuff. Right. Reset. Do we have a question from our excellent audience? I've got to flatter you to get a question. I'll flatter you. Come on. We need a question. We have a question here. Thank you.
Hi, I don't believe that plastic packaging or packaging in any form is the issue. I think waste and education is the issue. How do we ensure that we fix that going forward and make sure we have a proper waste stream and a proper education system that benefits us from the future?
So how do we make sure we have a system? Does anybody itching? You've got a mic here.
So as speaking as a chemistry professor, as I go around seeing what's happening in schools, it really is part of children's education. You know, there's a reason that that sensible people listen to Greta Thunberg and ignore Donald Trump. She speaks sense, and she learned it in school. If you go to university, now sustainability in the broadest sense is part of every degree subject, or it certainly is at my university, and that will continue. And so I agree with you completely that dealing with waste and moving away from a linear material system to a circular material system will come through education and that demand from those newly educated students.
There we go. Thank you for excellent. Thank you.
Can I just
pass
that back over
15 seconds, go on.
To the 4 team who said that we can recycle our way out of the problem, and just to address the waste stream issue, because we don't have the waste infrastructure to recycle our way out of the problem currently.
Perfect, gosh, right to the minute. So
let's build it.
Take it away, Richard, please, yes.
Well, as you said, I've got a significant budget. Anyone who wants us to build waste infrastructure for them, that's what we're doing all around the world. And I think in countries where they don't have the infrastructure, we need to put it in place. So that's why I say recycling our way out of it is part of the answer. You know, everything's part of the answer. There's no one's excluded from this solution game.
No one is excluded, right. Now we have, who is the tail enders, right, here we are, but play such an important part, don't they?
I know. Martin, you're being so offensive today, honestly.
No, it's
I'll
not.
get you next week in Brighton.
Cricket. It's, I'm getting excited. A new season coming. Come on. Maybe
Hi,
February.
everybody. Good afternoon. Firstly, thank you to the Packaging Innovations team for putting on this debate and for inviting me to be part of it. I think it's hugely important that we are finally moving on after the big plastics debate here for the last few years to talking about carbon. Certainly the industry is slowly evolving to have a more holistic view and not just being, what are we going to do about the anti-plastic sentiment? And plastic is bad, but we're really trying to have a more balanced discussion about carbon. For those who don't know, the World Wildlife Fund for Nature is the world's biggest independent environmental organisation, and we're proud to be material and technology agnostic. It's already been said, plastic pollution, let's differentiate. Plastic pollution is the most visible symptom of the environmental crisis that we're facing today. And it's so tangible. Everybody here, I can see you're thinking, but we want to believe that plastic is bad, and we're trying to put arguments that actually it's really beneficial and has been beneficial over the decades and will continue to be so for a net zero carbon ambition. But WWF are working to fight against plastic pollution. We've got our own Global Plastics Initiative, which is really tackling it from a systemic perspective. We've never once come out and said that plastic should be banned, because we take a holistic view as to what is best for the environment overall. And we know, and the research shows, and it has been pointed out, that if we hadn't had plastic, we'd already be under the sea. We would have hit 3 or 4 degrees already. But actually, the really tough thing around plastic and the debate about plastic pollution is that it means that we have to take a hard look at ourselves as consumers, not as industry people or working in whatever trade that you do, but as consumers, and just say, actually, we buy too much stuff. But with plastic, it's interesting because you buy something from the supermarket that's plastic and you feel you have no choice. But actually, did you really need to buy those strawberries out of season that got shipped all the way from wherever they've been shipped? No, you didn't. But you chose to, but then you get annoyed at the supermarket that they're in plastic. So it's kind of a bit of a no-win situation, and we have to start to be honest to ourselves about that. But I think everyone here knows, and the arguments have been put forward, that switching to alternative single-use materials is not the solution. In fact, as of 2014, the UK sourced 81% of the materials it requires for our domestic goods and services, the goods and services that we as consumers buy into, from abroad. So the UK has a huge global materials footprint. And in 2017, that global materials consumption hit 100 billion tons for the first time. That's a quadrupling since the 1970s. That's the rate at which we've been consuming stuff, more and more stuff. But businesses will continue to put a positive environmental spin when switching from plastic to paper or glass or aluminium, whatever it is. Okay, and frankly, that I roll my eyes every single time. An example of this is on LinkedIn. Someone posted about the Super Bowl moving from single-use PET cups to single-use aluminium cups. And all I could comment on was, I think the point has been sorely missed. So as a total industry, we've got to stop undermining each other and get together and look at a total vision of what's best for the environment. And it is around carbon. Yes, marine plastic pollution is a huge issue. WWF are calling for a global treaty to end marine plastic pollution. But actually, even David Attenborough himself said in the Our Planet series, plastic pollution is not the biggest challenge and threat that the oceans face. It's overfishing and climate change. But overfishing and climate change are so remote to all of us, but plastic is immediate. We have to throw it away. We have to put it in our bins. We put it in our recycle bins. We see it on the streets day to day, and that's why it's so visceral, the response you get to plastic pollution. But please, let's take a broader, more holistic view on all of this. And it's actually our general materials consumption that's causing the environmental crisis that we're seeing. So the key message from me is that we need to value the planet's precious resources by consuming less, minimising the waste that we create. And in the Environment Bill, we've got a great opportunity to push the government to put in really good waste minimisation targets.
I'm afraid I have to stop you there.
That's fine. I'm
It's
done.
only fair.
Thank you.
It's only fair. Thank you. Very good. Right. Now, do we have one more speaker left? I think we do. When you're ready.
Okay, so my name's Tony Ryan, and I agree with Paula. I agree with nearly everything she said, apart from one. Plastics are associated with climate change and carbon emissions, so they have to go. The pro-plastic argument, as demonstrated by Margaret and Simon, is too subtle to win, so they have to go. We need to defossilise, not decarbonise, and we should start with people like Barry.
Fossil.
Plastics packaging not only allows but also encourages this overconsumption and profit seeking at the expense of the environment. And I disagree vehemently with Richard. Plastic increased the rate of climate change because brands drive climate change. And it's through the brands and their environment-destroying, profit-seeking behaviour that's mandated by law because they have a fiduciary responsibility to deliver shareholder value above any external costs. That's why we sell even more fancy water in even fancier bottles. Brands only exist through their marketing, and this is encapsulated in branded packages. And let's be honest, it's the same shit in everyone's packs. So let's cure the disease and the symptoms will disappear. The only way to get to net zero and to defossilise is to change the law. We need to make nurturing the environment the primary responsibility of every company and make sure that they can only pay a dividend when they get over the environmental benefit bottom line. Ban all plastics, ban all marketing, ban all advertising and any branding. That will then take out the pressure to spend, and at least half of all those pointless sales. Like we were told, you don't need yet another reusable bottle to add to your ever-growing collection in the back of your SUV with all those bags for life. Then, because we've saved all the energy and not emitted those carbon atoms back into the atmosphere, it will make sense to use brown paper, reusable bottles and cans, have deposit return and refill schemes. And yes, pills can come in reusable bottles once again. Many corollary advantages will flow. We'll have new jobs in deposit return refill supply chains. More trips by cargo bike to return the empties, better managed forests, and even better quality craft beer to wash down with artisan sourdough avocado smash sarnies. Marketeers were put to work convincing us that marketeers were put to work to convince us to consume more. Those same marketeers who will now be out of business because there's no marketing, no advertising, no branding, can get a new job. And they can convince us that a plastic-free reuse world is the best thing since sliced bread because they are the buggers that started it. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Feel like it's a rerun of The Handmaid's Tale. Now, so, look, I'm going to change the format just a tiddly little bit. How about this team ask this team a question? Go on. And then we'll reverse it, a bit like tennis. Would you like to ask them a question?
I was there.
You will ask. You're probably in the mode. Do you want to ask them a question? Have you got your mics? All right, there we go.
Oceans absorb and sequester a lot of the carbon dioxide, human-made carbon dioxide. I think it's around 40%. So obviously there's a really clear argument that ocean health is absolutely key to this carbon debate. And plastics is something that is hugely damaging ocean health. So how would you respond to the health of oceans going forward with the increase of plastic production that's expected?
Okay. And who would like to back that one?
No, I'll take this one. I totally agree with you. Ocean health is a serious issue. Really serious issues that have been raised as part of the environment plan that we have to tackle. I think the issue, though, with plastics that we touched on earlier, and sort of great speech, and I look forward to this socialist state that we're moving towards. But the point is, if you're going to stop the leakage, I totally agree. There's got to be responsibility taken right across the chain. I made that point earlier, that in the developing world that step has to be made. But in terms of health, a big part of ocean health, our health, is about climate change. And can I ask how many of you are concerned about climate change? I think we all are seriously concerned about climate change. And the studies show that if we can actually, when we do use plastics responsibly, there is no doubt it will actually reduce the carbon emissions on this planet, despite the fact that the feedstock is fossil. And we are going to migrate over time away from that fossilized world. I'll probably be, sort of part of that migration, but as you pointed out. But the fact of the matter is it's already happening. I'm seeing polymer producers bring new products to the market that are coming from waste, not using land, from waste products, being used to naphtha, converted to naphtha, being converted, then can be recycled, end of life. That's got to be a good place to be.
Thank you, and we'll give the other team, we'll give you the opportunity to ask any question you like about life, drugs, sex, football, anything you want. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, they're really thinking about it. It's good, isn't it? Now, in between time, I mean...
No,
okay. We got it. Right.
Okay, well, we'll throw a question out there. With climate change in mind, in terms of choices, in terms of materials, regardless of whether it's a reusable container or whether it's a single-use container, what alternatives have you in mind that are going to deliver a lower emission and carbon impact?
So you have almost 2 minutes to... Oh, sorry.
So clearly it's horses for courses, and as you might expect of someone who actually took to the spirit of a debate, managed to insult everyone from the other team, I will back my team up here. So there are some situations where metal is clearly the right choice. There are other situations where glass is the right choice. So, for example, we've done a life cycle analysis on reusable glass milk bottles versus plastic milk bottles. And if you live close to the dairy, then it makes sense to reuse those glass bottles for many, many years rather than having single-use plastic. So making the right choices. And I will say that before we get into whoever wins the debate, I came to this as a debate, and there are many situations where reuse, refill models would benefit from the appropriate design of plastics containers. So in that sense, I'm agreeing with my colleague Simon, who took the middle ground. And obviously, if you give something economic value, i.e. you can get the deposit back, then the chances of it leaking into the sea will be much, much lower.
Excellent stuff. Right, so let me just reset that. Thank you both. Now, question from the audience. We have one here and we have one here. So we'll take you first, the lady behind this gentleman here, and then the gentleman in front of the lady there. Oh, aye.
Plastic bottle.
Yeah.
Hi, it's a
no, but the argument wasn't single use. The argument
It's no ordinary bottle.
it's a
Contains hemlock. Right, now, are we ready for the question?
Yeah, it's a question for Tony in the
Well,
spirit.
it's a question for both of them. Sorry, they're both.
It's largely for Tony.
No,
to be fair.
it has to.
All right, I'm aiming it to you, Tony. They can have a go at answering it too.
Yeah.
So, in the spirit of a debate and being a bit naughty, how do you reconcile your comment of ban all plastics with the hypocrisy of wearing plastic glasses, sit on a plastic chair, driving in your light-weighted car in your insulated home? Or are you suggesting we go back to drawing water from the well wearing sackcloth and ashes?
Right.
In response, these spectacles are made from, the frames are made from recycled fishing nets. The lenses are polycarbonate, but I could have glass lenses. I didn't come in a lightweight car. I came on a metal train.
Clothes?
I don't know what I'd make my cycling helmet out of. So there are, I think that the part that's where we're going to get to is that the single use and dispose is the issue. And as everyone pointed out, it's actually the pollution that's the visceral problem and detracts us from the real issue of how do we defossilize.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to answer that, or would you rather? Go on then, go for it. Yeah.
I'm going to try it, yeah. Just say quickly, I think the risk we're falling into here is polarising the argument. And polarising arguments really don't help, because the answer isn't plastic or no plastic, banning plastic or everything being plastic. It's about where is plastic the right thing. And often the correct answer for what is the right thing is plastic, but not always. And having these polarised debates, this one excluded, obviously, means that we don't have a sensible discussion about how do we measure where plastic is the right thing and how do we determine the right thing for the right situation.
Thank you. So let's just remind ourselves here, we're going to have some more questions from the audience. Oh, sorry, we had one burning, didn't you? So you do that and then... Please, thank you. Hopefully to both teams can, yeah.
So it's a general question about unintended consequences. So currently waste management companies make money from generating electricity by incinerating plastic-rich packaging materials. Are the incentives broken?
Are the incentives, we're talking about incineration. Shall we let them, you're happy with that, right, okay.
I think probably saying it like that's picking out one element of what waste management companies do. What waste management companies actually do, our actual proposition, is to reduce the impact of human activity. That's what we set out to do, and that is what we deliver. We build infrastructure that reduces overall impacts on the environment from toxic waste and from carbon emissions. And everything we do, everything we invest in does that. So we recycle 2 million tonnes of material in this country, and we also recover energy from 2 million tonnes of non-recyclable material. And that energy displaces coal and gas on the network. And that's what we're investing in to reduce impacts. And we're willing to invest as much as people want us to reduce all of our impacts, because every single person in this room has an impact.
Thank you. And equally...
Can I just quickly on that?
Oh, I didn't say an addendum.
I know, I'm sorry, but the...
Did I say addendum? No.
In terms of unintended consequences, as a byproduct of waste incineration,
right. No,
which
to be
is
fair,
the ash, which is contaminated.
Sorry, sir.
So
can you answer the first question? I'm really got to be, otherwise it's not fair.
In terms of unintended consequences, one of the side effects is the gas produced. And the ash. So the ash can absolutely go somewhere. It can be incorporated in building materials and can use some of the waste. But the unintended consequences come about because of a specific conflict between policy and profit seeking. Okay, so the company exists to pay shareholder value. It happens to do it by collecting waste, recycling waste and incinerating waste, and will seek profit wherever. So if the policy's ill-framed, then the unintended consequence can actually be worse for the environment and not better.
Right, and now we will take Who wants to? Well, I forgot what the question. Oh no, we've done. You did have an addendum. Do you want to ask your addendum? Because I can see you're a man who loves an addendum.
No, so so it basically we're looking at packaging as a fuel for our power generation. This is one of its properties. So it's becoming then a byproduct of waste incineration, which is the ash, which is contaminated due to how the air is cleaned in the chimneys of the waste incinerators. So so ultimately the packaging is becoming toxic ash, and we're producing tons and tons of this stuff. Since as China is no longer taking our waste, we're building more and more waste incinerators to deal with this issue. And so this I see is
all right. So what's the question?
So the question is,
very quick.
Are we becoming dependent on waste to energy, and what's the unintended consequences of that?
Oh, you're too dependent on waste to energy.
I thought I'd give Richard a break.
Yeah, I think so.
So, firstly, as mentioned, the ash gets recycled and used into a lot of construction materials. And the thing to remember when you're referring to energy from waste always as a disposal technique, and a lot of people refer to it like it's really inefficient in the UK and really efficient everywhere else. And one of the reasons people say that is because of the heat, because in a policy disconnect, we do not build our energy from waste infrastructure close enough to the demand for heat, and heat deteriorates as you move it. So the only stuff that will be used for energy recovery is where it's pretty much not good enough for anything else. Now, if we can sort out properly, and I mean properly, chemical recycling, we might see a change in that balance. But at the moment, what we're doing is recovering the value from a material that otherwise would go to landfill. We're not recovering it from something that would otherwise be recycled. It's recovering stuff that otherwise would go to landfill, which is generally agreed is the worst case scenario.
We'll stop you there, Margaret. Do you want to? If you want to, Robert, yes, go for it.
Without wishing to sound too flippant, the upside of metal, of course, is that if it does end up in the incinerator by accident, it actually is then collected from the bottom ash, and it is still used and goes back into recycling. In fact, the British Metals Recycling Association has 2 official grades for bottom ash collected packaging, 6A and 6B. So once again, metal wins. Thank you.
So, as they say, not a lot of people know that. Paula, you can come back, but they will have to have another chance here.
Just to rebalance and reiterate the point that I made, that it's not about one material versus another. Every material has its impact. So, can you guarantee that all the aluminium, all the bauxite that's being mined is actually being done sustainably? There's no soil pollution, there's no red water resulting from it. Glass. Did you know that there's potentially going to be a sand shortage in 20 years? Because we're taking too much sand. Okay, a lot of that's for construction and for concrete, but also for glass. Paper. Ironically, the reason why plastic was invented is because everyone was getting their knickers in a twist about trees being cut down. But, we don't have any due diligence requirements in this country that all our paper packaging has to come from sustainable sources. So we don't know where it's coming from. Deforestation is a huge contributor to climate change. So just to rebalance it all materials have their impacts.
And
we can use those materials over and over again, the better. Right.
Do you want to come? Please don't be shy. Now.
Applause only. Only applause.
Only applause.
Or are we summing up?
No, you're not summing up. I was just going to say if you want to answer, because I'm going to ask a question.
No. So just Sheffield, as a pretty sustainable city, has a combined heat and power that's run off waste in the middle of the city. It's yours.
Yours. Is that right?
Can I just point out, though, Sheffield doesn't do separate food waste collection, so not that sustainable.
Right, shall we? This is obviously turning into the Sheffield debate. We're going to start hearing about Sheffield bands soon, the Human League or something. So, right, look, this House believes that we will fail to meet net zero carbon targets if we ban plastic packaging. So that is the debate we have here. Now, when you think about that, you know, I might even say, well, is this net zero carbon thing the right thing to be chasing? I mean, there is debate about this as well. Does it mean anything? However, I am reminded of the time, and I would have asked a question on that. Oh my goodness, the time has gone on. We have summing up to do. I'm going to, actually, I mean, normally I think them and then you, but defense and whatever. Who would like to do their summing up first? You get 3 minutes. Who would enjoy doing it? You would like to do it? You're right.
I'm not sure it matters too much because most of the other team agree with us anyway.
Sorry?
Most of the other team agree with us anyway, so I think we probably just... Sorry.
How dare he? Now, sir, the platform is yours.
So, as Richard said, most of our team agree with them. And that's absolutely right. We all agree that plastic pollution is the problem. Rebecca told us that LCAs don't always give the most appropriate answer. An LCA won't tell you about the environmental risk. It won't tell you about what happens in the sea. Sadly, Simon told us that, no, not Simon told us. Yeah, Simon told us that he wasn't that bothered about seagulls with plastic bags on their heads because they weren't really an issue. And I have to say that even though he's on my team, I don't agree with him. Yeah, you did say that. You said some pretty shocking things, mate. Yeah.
Let the man finish, right.
Well,
don't worry.
We'll replay the video.
He's speaking on you. Come on, man.
So the Robert told us that plastic packaging was vilified and he didn't want to defend the indefensible. He also told us that there's 80% of all the metal that's ever been mined is still in use. And that's a great indication of a circular economy that might work. So what we ought to do is try to get to a situation where more than 80% of the fossilized carbon that's dug out of the ground gets reused. To approach, if once we can defossilize, then absolutely whatever material's used doesn't matter, as long as we keep it going round and round. So we have to invest in the right kind of packaging, and the right kind of packaging depends on the energy mix. Simon didn't want to polarize the argument. He wanted us to use the right material, and the examples he used were to show us how emotional the use of plastic is. And that's why I feel that we really have lost the battle. That in 10 years' time, we won't be having this discussion because there won't be the same kind of economy available if we pursue this path of pollution for profit.
1 minute.
And I'm done.
You're done. You're done and oven ready. Right. Come on, big clap. That's it. Okay, and then there we go, Margaret.
Right, so firstly, we have to agree with the other side where they agree with us. And to remember that without plastic, we would have a 3 to 4 degree rise in global temperature. We would be screwed, and there's a lot of people in this country at the moment who are seeing the impacts of climate change as their flood defences fail. We need to get to greater material circularity. A recent report showed that globally we're at 8.6 circularity for materials. That's really not good enough. We need to up that. And I know it's old-fashioned, but we need to look back to the waste hierarchy. We need to reduce. We need to not buy stuff we don't need. We need to think very carefully. And when we're talking about reuse, we're often talking about plastic. If you asked your grandmother about a situation for reuse, I would guess that a lot of them would refer to Tupperware, though other brands are available. And that's plastic, because plastic is great for reuse as well. And also, we have some really good systems for recycling. But the key thing isn't that plastic's always right, the metal's always right. The key thing is that we use the right material in the right situation, we make sure our systems are robust, we educate people to use our systems, and then we stop the leakage into the environment, and we move it from a derisory 8.6 circularity into something we can actually be proud of to future generations.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. Well, first of all, I hope we've all enjoyed that. Now, look, I will remind you again, this House believes that we will fail to meet net zero carbon targets if we ban plastic packaging. How many? I'm trying to work out how best to do this, because I like everyone to be a winner. Everyone should get a prize, because they've all been fantastic. Thank you. Now, how many people came today who had a predetermined view, whether they were for or against the motion? How many of you did? Just out of interest, how many people have sort of kind of been persuaded and changed their minds about life in general? I'm determined, because I don't want to get to this thing, and I don't want anybody to leave here sad. It's terrible, isn't it? But I know what you want to do, you see, and I do know how can we do this? We can either do it the orthodox way. Oh, I know. What we'll say is, I'm going to ask you to say, all of those who think the against team sort of moved you and influenced you, and you actually, bugger it, enjoyed listening to what they had to say. Let's do that. Which one of these teams you enjoyed most? Oh, well, come on then. Give me better, Margaret. Let me off the hook. Right. No, okay. Let's just do it on that basis, first of all. Which of these teams did you enjoy hearing, and so on? So hands up for this team. I agree. Right? No. This is it. Look at this. And what about this team? Well, that's interesting. So I'm probably, who do you think's got this? All right. You see, I was told by the organisers everybody's got to get a party bag. So, right. This House believes that we will fail to meet net zero carbon targets if we ban plastic packaging. Against. How many hands up? 4. Right. You know what? Thank you. You've been a brilliant audience. You have absolutely been magnificent. I think we have had an amazingly fab debate. We should do it more often. You should come again. So let's have a huge, I'm not going to go over everybody's name again, just a massive round of applause for everyone. Louder, come on. Thank you so much. Thank you for enjoying the big carbon debate. We want a photograph here, but thank you all for being here, and wonderful everything else. Rotten. I know. Well done.